The Johnson family had always loved spending their summers by the ocean. Every year they would pack their bags and head to the coast of Maine for a week of boating, fishing, and laughter. For David and Laura Johnson, it was a way to escape the busyness of life and reconnect with their children, Jake and Megan. Their son Jake was 16, tall and quiet, often lost in his own thoughts. Megan, their 10-year-old daughter, was the opposite, full of energy, curiosity, and endless questions about the world around her. She loved exploring the beach, collecting seashells, and watching the waves crash against the rocks. This summer was no different. The family arrived at their favorite spot along the coast, where the water sparkled under the sun and the air smelled salty and fresh. They rented a small boat, just big enough for the four of them, and planned to spend their days cruising along the shoreline. David, who had been sailing since he was a teenager, felt confident handling the vessel. Laura sat near the front, enjoying the breeze while Jake and Megan laughed and played games in the middle of the boat. On the third day of their trip, the weather began to change. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, creeping closer with each passing hour. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees along the shore. A local fisherman warned them earlier that morning about an approaching storm, advising everyone to stay off the water. But David brushed it off. He had checked the forecast before leaving home, and it hadn't mentioned anything severe. "We'll be fine," he assured his family. "Let's just go out for a quick ride and come back before it gets bad." Megan clapped her hands excitedly at the idea. "Can we go to that little cove we saw yesterday?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. It was a hidden spot nestled between two cliffs, surrounded by lush greenery. The water there was calm and clear, perfect for swimming. Jake rolled his eyes but didn't argue. Laura hesitated for a moment, glancing at the darkening sky, but then nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "But let's hurry." They set off in the early afternoon, the boat cutting smoothly through the gentle waves. At first, everything seemed peaceful. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting golden rays onto the water. Megan leaned over the edge of the boat, pointing at schools of fish darting beneath the surface. Jake teased her, pretending to grab one with his hands. Even Laura relaxed, letting herself enjoy the moment. But nature can turn unpredictable in an instant. By the time they reached the cove, the wind had grown stronger, whipping the water into choppy ripples. The once clear sky was now a swirling mass of gray and black. David frowned as he looked around. "We should head back," he said, raising his voice to be heard over the rising wind. "This isn't going to wait much longer." Just as he turned the boat around, a massive wave crashed against the side, sending a spray of cold seawater into the air. Everyone gasped, startled. Megan squealed with laughter, thinking it was part of the adventure. But Jake noticed the tension on his father's face. "Dad, are you sure we're okay?" he asked nervously. "We'll be fine," David repeated, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Just hold on." The journey back was anything but smooth. The waves grew taller and more violent, slamming into the boat with relentless force. Rain began to pour down, soaking them all within minutes. Laura held onto the railing, her knuckles white, while Jake wrapped an arm around Megan to keep her steady. The wind howled like a wild animal, drowning out their voices. Then, disaster struck. A particularly large wave surged toward them, lifting the boat high into the air before slamming it back down. The impact threw everyone off balance. Megan, who had been standing near the edge, slipped on the wet deck. Before anyone could react, she tumbled overboard, disappearing into the frothy chaos below. "Megan!" Laura screamed, lunging toward the spot where her daughter had fallen. David spun the boat around, desperately searching for any sign of her. Jake leaned over the side, scanning the water, his heart pounding. "There!" he shouted, spotting a flash of red, the bright swimsuit Megan had been wearing. But the current was too strong, pulling her farther away with each passing second. David grabbed a life ring and threw it toward her, shouting instructions. "Grab it, sweetheart. Hold on." But the storm swallowed his words. Megan flailed in, the water, her small arms struggling against the powerful waves. For a brief moment their eyes met, and David saw the fear in hers. Then she went under. "No!" Laura cried, collapsing to her knees. Jake tried to jump in after his sister, but David held him back. "You'll drown too," he yelled, tears streaming down his face. Together they scanned the water frantically, hoping to see Megan resurface. But the storm showed no mercy. Minutes passed, then hours, and still, there was no sign of her. When the Coast Guard finally arrived, summoned by a panicked call from David's radio, it was too late. Searchlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the endless expanse of water. Divers scoured the area, but the sea gave nothing back. Megan was gone. The days that followed were a blur of grief and guilt. The Johnsons returned home to Massachusetts, their hearts heavy with sorrow. Laura couldn't stop blaming herself for not stopping the trip sooner. David replayed every decision he made that day, wondering if he could have done something differently. Jake withdrew into himself, haunted by the image of his sister slipping into the water. And Megan's absence left a void that nothing could fill. Neighbors and friends tried to offer comfort, but words felt hollow in the face of such loss. Some suggested therapy or support groups, but none of it helped. The Johnsons existed in a fog, going through the motions of daily life without truly living. Holidays, birthdays, and milestones were painful reminders of what they had lost. Megan's bedroom remained untouched, her toys and books gathering dust as if frozen in time. Yet, amidst the despair, a tiny flicker of hope lingered. Stories began, circulating among locals about sightings of a young girl matching Megan's description, wandering coastal towns. Some claimed to have seen her playing on the beach. Others swore they spotted her standing alone at the edge of the water, staring out at the horizon. These accounts were dismissed by most as wishful thinking or coincidence, but for the Johnsons, they provided a sliver of solace. Perhaps, somewhere out there, Megan was alive. Perhaps the sea hadn't claimed her after all. Years passed, and life moved forward, though the wound never fully healed. Jake graduated high school and moved to Seattle, eager to put distance between himself and the memories of that fateful day. Laura threw herself into volunteering at a local shelter, finding purpose in helping others. David remarried, a kind woman named Susan. But even she couldn't erase the ache in his heart. Still, the question lingered in the back of their minds. What really happened to Megan? Was she truly gone, or was there a chance she had survived? It was a mystery that refused to fade, buried deep beneath layers of pain and longing. Little did they know, answers would come in ways they could never have imagined. 11 years had passed since the storm that changed everything for the Johnson family. The pain of losing Megan never fully disappeared, but life forced them to move forward in its own way. Each member of the family found their own path to cope with the loss, though none of them truly healed. Jake, now 27, lived in Seattle, far from the memories of Maine and the ocean. He worked as a software engineer, spending long hours at his desk coding programs and solving technical problems. It was easier to focus on work than to think about the past. Over time, he built a new life for himself, new friends, new routines. But there were moments when the weight of guilt would creep back in. He still blamed himself for not holding on to Megan tighter that day. Sometimes, late at night, he would sit by his window, staring out at the city lights, wondering what might have been if he had acted faster. Laura, now in her late 50s, threw herself into helping others. She volunteered at a local shelter for women and children, finding comfort in making a difference in their lives. It gave her a sense of purpose, something to fill the emptiness left by Megan's absence. But even as she smiled and offered kindness to those around her, there was always a sadness in her eyes. On quiet evenings, she would sit alone in her living room, flipping through old photo albums. Pictures of Megan as a child brought both joy and heartache. Laura often wondered what her daughter would look like now. Would she be tall like Jake? Would she still laugh the same way, bright and carefree? David, nearing 60, remarried 5 years after the tragedy. His wife, Susan, was warm and understanding, doing her best to support him through the lingering grief. Together they traveled, took up gardening, and tried to build a peaceful life. Yet, David carried a heaviness inside him that no amount of happiness could erase. He avoided talking about Megan, afraid that opening up would unleash a flood of emotions he wasn't ready to face. Still, he kept a small box in his closet filled with mementos: Megan's favorite stuffed animal, a bracelet she once wore, and a drawing she made for him when she was 6. These items were treasures he couldn't bear to part with. Despite the years that had passed, whispers of Megan occasionally surfaced in their hometown. Friends and neighbors sometimes mentioned strange sightings: a young girl with blonde hair walking along the beach, or a figure standing silently near the water's edge. Most dismissed these stories as coincidences or overactive imaginations. But the Johnsons couldn't help but wonder, could it really be Megan? Was it possible she had somehow survived? In another part of the country, Ryan Carter, a commercial airline pilot based in Chicago, lived a relatively ordinary life. At 34, he enjoyed the freedom and adventure his job provided. Flying gave him a sense of peace, a chance to escape the noise of everyday life and soar above the clouds. He loved watching the world stretch out below him, vast and endless. One evening, during a routine flight back from Miami, Ryan's plane encountered unexpected turbulence. The weather reports hadn't predicted anything severe, so the sudden shaking caught everyone off guard. Passengers gripped their armrests, some whispering prayers under their breath. Ryan remained calm, expertly guiding the aircraft through the rough patches. To avoid the worst of the storm, he adjusted the flight path slightly, steering the plane farther east than usual. As the turbulence eased, Ryan glanced out the cockpit window. Below him, the ocean shimmered under the moonlight, dotted with waves and shadows. Then something unusual caught his eye: an isolated island, barely visible amidst the darkness. It was tiny, surrounded by jagged rocks and thick jungle. Ryan frowned, leaning closer to get a better look. He didn't remember seeing this island on any map or chart. Curiosity piqued, he circled lower, scanning the area more carefully, and then he saw her. Standing near the shoreline was a figure, a young woman with long, tangled hair, waving wildly at the passing aircraft. Her movements were frantic, as if she desperately wanted to be noticed. Ryan's heart raced. Who was she? What was she doing on such a remote island? He quickly radioed air traffic control, reporting the sighting and describing the location as best he could. But when asked for exact coordinates, he realized he hadn't recorded them accurately. The island disappeared behind thick clouds moments later, leaving him questioning whether what he'd seen was real or just a trick of the light. Back on the ground in Chicago, Ryan couldn't shake the image of the mysterious woman from his mind. Something about her felt important, though he couldn't explain why. Determined to follow up, he contacted maritime authorities, sharing his account and urging them to investigate. His report sparked skepticism among officials. Many believed he had misidentified a known landmass or imagined the entire thing due to stress. However, a few took his story seriously enough to launch a preliminary search. News of the potential discovery eventually reached the Johnson household. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Laura was scrolling through articles online when she stumbled across a headline: Pilot reports sighting of mysterious woman on uncharted island. Intrigued, she clicked on the link and began reading. As she absorbed the details, her hands trembled. The description of the woman matched what Megan might look like today, around 21 years old with long hair and a slender build. Laura called David and Jake immediately, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "You need to read this," she said, her words rushing together. "It's about a pilot who saw someone on an island. It could be Megan." Jake listened quietly on the phone, his mind racing. Could it really be her? After all these years, was it possible she was still alive? David joined the call, his tone cautious but curious. They agreed to share Megan's case with the investigators involved in the search. Though hesitant to get their hopes up, they clung to the fragile possibility that this journey might bring answers, or perhaps redemption. A team of experts was assembled to investigate the claim. Geologists, biologists, and survival specialists combed through satellite imagery, searching for signs of the elusive island. After days of analysis, they identified a previously undocumented speck of land roughly 200 miles southeast of Bermuda. Dubbed Island X, it appeared uninhabited and untouched by civilization. Preparations were made for an expedition, and the Johnsons insisted on joining the mission. For the first time in years, they felt a flicker of hope, a chance to uncover the truth about Megan. Ryan, eager to see his discovery through, volunteered to guide the team using his first-hand observations. Dr. Emily Ross, a marine biologist specializing in isolated ecosystems, joined the crew to study the island's unique environment. The group set sail under clear skies, equipped with supplies and determination. Among them, the Johnsons carried a mix of anticipation and dread. What would they find on Island X? Would it finally give them closure, or reveal something even more extraordinary? As the ship sailed toward the unknown, each member of the expedition wrestled with their own thoughts. Laura prayed silently, clutching a locket containing a picture of Megan. David stared out at the horizon, his jaw clenched with resolve. Jake paced the deck, torn between hope and fear. And Ryan watched the waves, wondering if fate had led him to this moment for a reason. What awaited them on the island was impossible to predict, but one thing was certain: their lives were about to change forever. The expedition set sail under clear skies, the ocean stretching endlessly in every direction. The ship was small but sturdy, designed for navigating rough waters and remote areas. On board were Ryan Carter, the pilot whose discovery had sparked the mission; Dr. Emily Ross, a marine biologist with expertise in isolated ecosystems; a team of scientists and survival specialists; and most importantly, the Johnson family, David, Laura, and Jake. Each of them carried their own emotions: hope, fear, guilt, and a deep longing for answers. For the Johnsons, this journey felt surreal. After 11 years of living with unanswered questions, they were finally taking action. Laura clutched a worn photograph of Megan as a child, her fingers tracing the edges as if trying to hold on to the memory. David stood at the railing, staring out at the horizon, his expression unreadable. Jake paced back and forth, unable to sit still. He wanted to believe that this trip would bring closure, but he couldn't shake the feeling that it might lead to more heartbreak. Ryan, on the other hand, felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. His accidental sighting of the mysterious woman on Island X weighed heavily on his mind. What if she really was Megan? What if his report had opened the door to reuniting a family torn apart by tragedy? He spent hours poring over maps and coordinates, determined to guide the team accurately. Dr. Emily Ross kept herself busy preparing equipment and jotting down notes. She was fascinated by the idea of an uncharted island and what secrets it might hold about nature and human resilience. After 2 tense days at sea, the outline of Island X emerged on the horizon. At first, it was just a shadowy blur, almost blending into the clouds above it. But as the ship drew closer, the island revealed itself, a jagged mass of rock and dense jungle shrouded in mist. It looked untouched, as though no human had ever set foot there. The crew fell silent, awestruck by its wild beauty. As they approached, something unusual caught their attention. Carved into the cliffs along the shoreline were strange symbols, patterns that didn't match any known language or culture. They were intricate and deliberate, etched deeply into the stone. Dr. Ross snapped photos, her eyes wide with wonder. "This is incredible," she murmured. "These markings could be centuries old. We're looking at history here." The Johnsons exchanged nervous glances. Could these carvings have anything to do with Megan? Had someone else been stranded here before? Or were they simply remnants of an ancient civilization long forgotten? The team anchored offshore and prepared to disembark. A smaller boat ferried them to the rocky beach, where they stepped onto dry land for the first time. The air smelled earthy and damp, filled with the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. Despite its beauty, the island felt eerie, as if it were hiding something. Venturing inland, the group began searching for signs of human activity. They moved cautiously, pushing through thick vines and dodging low-hanging branches. Dr. Ross pointed out unusual plants and insects, noting how the island's isolation had allowed unique species to thrive. But the Johnsons weren't interested in biology. They were searching for Megan. Then they found evidence that someone had been living there. Scattered throughout the jungle were makeshift shelters woven from palm leaves and driftwood. Remnants of campfires lay cold and abandoned, surrounded by charred sticks and ash. Tools crafted from stone and bone hinted at resourcefulness and survival skills honed over time. It was clear that whoever lived here had adapted to the harsh environment. Laura knelt beside one of the shelters, her hands trembling as she touched the frayed edges of a woven mat. This could be hers, she whispered, her voice breaking. David placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, though his own face betrayed his inner turmoil. Jake scanned the area, his sharp eyes catching movement in the distance. A flash of color among the trees. "Did you see that?" he asked suddenly, pointing ahead. Everyone froze, straining to listen. Then, faintly, they heard it. A voice calling out. It was soft at first, barely audible over the rustling leaves, but it grew louder and more urgent. "Help! Over here!" The voice sent chills down their spines. Following the sound, they pushed deeper into the jungle until they reached a clearing. There, standing near the edge of the trees, was a young woman. Her hair was long and tangled, streaked with dirt and sunlight. Her clothes were ragged, patched together from scraps of fabric. She looked thin and weathered, her skin tanned from years under the sun, but her piercing blue eyes locked onto theirs with startling clarity. Laura gasped, clutching David's arm so tightly her nails dug in. "It's her," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "It's Megan." For a moment, no one moved. Megan stared at the strangers approaching her, confusion etched across her face. She recognized her mother's voice but struggled to reconcile it with the memories buried deep within her mind. Over the years, she had survived alone on the island, learning to live off the land and adapt to its challenges. The initial trauma of being lost at sea had faded into a blur, replaced by a primal existence dictated by the rhythms of nature. David took a hesitant step forward, his voice cracking as he spoke. "Megan? Is that really you?" Megan blinked, tilting her head slightly as if trying to place him. Then recognition flickered in her eyes. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Tears welled up, spilling down her cheeks as she stumbled toward them. Laura rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter for the first time in 11 years. David joined them, pulling both of them into a tight embrace. Jake stood back, watching the scene unfold, his own tears streaming silently. Ryan watched, the emotional reunion, feeling both relief and awe. His accidental discovery had reunited a fractured family, proving that sometimes fate intervenes in ways we can't comprehend. Dr. Ross observed quietly, marveling at Megan's resilience. How had she managed to survive alone for so long? What stories did this island hold? Once the initial shock wore off, the team helped Megan settle into the boat. She was weak and exhausted, her body unused to human contact or civilized comforts. As they sailed back toward the mainland, she began piecing together fragments of her past. With gentle encouragement from Dr. Ross, she recounted snippets of her ordeal, the storm, the endless drifting, washing ashore on the island, and how she learned to fend for herself. She spoke of loneliness, fear, and moments of beauty amid desolation. The Johnsons listened intently, their hearts breaking and healing all at once. For 11 years they had imagined the worst. Now, against all odds, they had found Megan alive. It was a miracle none of them thought possible, but questions lingered. How had Megan survived alone for so long? Were there others like her, stranded on forgotten islands? And what role did the enigmatic symbols carved into the cliffs play in her story? The journey home promised answers and perhaps even more mysteries waiting to be unraveled. The return journey to the mainland was a mix of overwhelming emotions for everyone on board. Megan sat quietly, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes wide as she took in the sight of the ship and its crew. She had spent 11 years alone on Island X, surviving day by day with only the jungle and the ocean as companions. Now, surrounded by people speaking rapidly and asking questions, she felt both comforted and overwhelmed. Her family, her parents, her brother, were there, but they seemed like strangers. Their faces were familiar yet distant, like faded photographs she couldn't quite place. Laura stayed by Megan's side, holding her hand tightly, afraid to let go even for a moment. "You're safe now," she whispered over and over, as if trying to convince herself as much as her daughter. David stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching Megan with a mixture of disbelief and relief. Jake hovered awkwardly, unsure how to act around someone who used to be his little sister but now felt like a completely different person. He wanted to hug her, to tell her how sorry he was for not being able to save her that day, but the words stuck in his throat. Megan looked at each of them, her brow furrowed in concentration. She remembered their voices, their faces, but the memories were hazy, like dreams half forgotten upon waking. "Mom?" she said softly, turning to Laura. "Is it really you?" Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart, it's me. We've been looking for you for so long." Megan's lips trembled and she lowered her gaze. I thought I was alone forever," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I didn't think anyone would ever find me." Ryan, who had been standing near the railing, stepped closer. "We weren't sure what we'd find when we came here," he said gently. "But I'm glad we did." He smiled at Megan, though his expression was tinged with sadness. Knowing he had played a part in bringing this family back together filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. Dr. Emily Ross joined the conversation, introducing herself and explaining her role in studying the island. "Megan, your survival is remarkable," she said kindly. "Do you mind telling us more about how you managed to live there for so long?" Megan hesitated, glancing at her family before nodding. "At first I didn't know what to do," she began slowly. "I woke up on the beach after the storm, scared and cold. There was no one else around. I cried a lot, thinking I'd never see my family again." She paused, taking a deep breath. "But then I realized I had to figure things out if I wanted to stay alive." She described how she learned to catch fish using sharpened sticks and weave traps from vines to catch crabs. She collected rainwater and hollowed out shells and ate fruits and plants she found in the jungle, carefully testing them to avoid poison. At night, she built shelters from palm leaves and driftwood to protect herself from the elements. Over time, she adapted to the rhythms of the island, the tides, the weather patterns, the behavior of animals. The loneliness was the hardest part, she confessed. Sometimes she talked to the trees or sang songs to keep herself company. Other times, she simply stared out at the ocean, hoping against hope that someone would come. Her story left the group speechless. Dr. Ross scribbled notes furiously, fascinated by Megan's resourcefulness and resilience. "This is extraordinary," she murmured. "You've done something most people wouldn't survive." As the ship sailed closer to the mainland, the Johnsons began discussing what life would look like for Megan now. They knew it wouldn't be easy. After 11 years away from civilization, everything would feel foreign to her. Cars, phones, stores, even basic household appliances. But they were determined to help her adjust no matter how long it took. When they finally docked, a small crowd had gathered to welcome them back. News of Megan's miraculous survival had spread quickly, thanks to media coverage of Ryan's discovery and the subsequent expedition. Reporters jostled for position, shouting questions and snapping photos. Flashbulbs popped, and microphones were thrust toward the family. David raised a hand to shield Megan from the chaos, guiding her off the ship and into a waiting car. Susan, David's wife, met them at the port, tears streaming down her face as she embraced Megan. Back at the Johnson home, the house buzzed with activity. Friends and neighbors dropped by with food and gifts, eager to celebrate Megan's return. But the attention made Megan uneasy. She retreated to her old bedroom, which Laura had kept exactly as it was since the day she disappeared. Toys, books, and posters adorned the walls, frozen in time. Sitting on the edge of her bed, Megan ran her fingers over the soft fabric of her childhood quilt, trying to reconnect with the girl she used to be. Over the following weeks, the family worked hard to help Megan adjust to modern life. Simple tasks like using a faucet or turning on a light switch required explanation and practice. Technology baffled her. Smartphones and computers seemed alien and intimidating. Laura patiently taught her how to use a microwave and make toast, while David showed her how to operate the TV remote. Jake tried to bond with her by playing video games, though Megan struggled to understand the concept of virtual worlds. Despite the challenges, Megan showed determination. She was eager to learn and adapt, driven by a desire to reclaim the life she had lost. Slowly, she began to rediscover joy in small pleasures: a warm meal, a comfortable bed, laughter shared with her family. Yet there were moments when the weight of all she had endured caught up with her. Nightmares haunted her sleep and sudden noises made her flinch. Laura often found her sitting by the window, staring out at the horizon, lost in thought. Meanwhile, scientists continued studying Island X, uncovering clues about its history and Megan's time there. The strange carvings on the cliffs proved to be ancient symbols, possibly linked to a forgotten civilization. Archaeologists speculated that the island might have once served as a refuge for sailors or explorers stranded at sea. Tools and artifacts discovered near Megan's shelters suggested she wasn't the first human to inhabit the land, though she was certainly the most recent. Ryan remained close to the Johnsons, attending therapy sessions with Megan to process his role in her rescue. He became a trusted friend to the family, offering support and encouragement during difficult times. For him, the experience reinforced his belief in the interconnectedness of humanity. Though he had stumbled upon Island X by chance, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was meant to happen, that somehow fate had guided him to Megan. As months passed, Megan's progress became evident. She enrolled in community college classes, eager to catch up on the education she had missed. Teachers marveled at her intelligence and determination, noting how quickly she absorbed new information. Outside of school, she volunteered at a local animal shelter, finding comfort in caring for creatures who, like her, had known hardship and loss. The Johnsons, too, began to heal. The scars of the past would always remain, but they felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Megan's return gave them a second chance, a chance to rebuild their family and create new memories together. Holidays, birthdays, and milestones took on new meaning, celebrated with gratitude for the gift of reunion. Still, questions lingered in the back of their minds. How had Megan survived alone for so long? What secrets did Island X hold about those who came before her? And what role did the mysterious carvings play in the island's history? These mysteries remained unsolved, reminders that some answers may never fully come to light. But for now, the Johnsons focused on the present. Megan was home, alive and thriving despite the odds. That was enough for today, tomorrow, and all the days ahead. Life for Megan Johnson was a delicate balancing act. Each day brought new challenges, but also moments of triumph that reminded her, and her family, of how far she had come. The transition from Island X to the modern world wasn't easy, but Megan faced it with the same determination that had kept her alive for 11 years. Her journey of adaptation became a testament to human resilience, inspiring everyone around her. At first, even simple tasks felt overwhelming. Walking into a grocery store, for example, left her dizzy with sensory overload. The bright lights, the endless rows of products, and the constant hum of chatter were too much to process. She clung to Laura's arm, whispering, "There's so much. I don't know where to look." Laura guided her gently, explaining what each aisle held and helping her choose items for dinner. By the third trip, Megan began recognizing familiar foods and even ventured down an aisle on her own. Technology proved to be another hurdle. Smartphones baffled her. The tiny screens and endless apps seemed like something out of a science fiction movie. Jake tried to teach her how to use one, starting with basic functions like making calls and sending texts. "It's just a tool," he told her encouragingly. "You'll get the hang of it." Megan nodded, though her fingers trembled as she tapped the screen. It took weeks of practice before she could confidently send a text message without accidentally opening the wrong app. Despite these struggles, Megan found joy in rediscovering the comforts of home. The softness of a mattress after years of sleeping on hard ground made her smile. Hot showers, a luxury she hadn't experienced since childhood, became her favorite part of the day. She loved sitting at the dining table with her family, sharing meals and laughter. These small pleasures reminded her of what she had missed and what she was determined not to take for granted. Her education became a priority. Enrolling in community college classes was daunting at first. Sitting in a classroom filled with students half her age made her feel self-conscious. But Megan refused to let fear hold her back. She threw herself into her studies, devouring textbooks and asking questions during lectures. Her teachers noticed her dedication and often praised her progress. "Megan has an incredible ability to learn quickly," one professor remarked. "She's proof that intelligence isn't about where you start, it's about how hard you're willing to work." Outside of school, Megan found solace in volunteering at the local animal shelter. Caring for abandoned pets resonated deeply with her own experience of being lost and alone. She spent hours brushing dogs, feeding cats, and cleaning cages, finding comfort in their unconditional affection. One dog, a scruffy terrier named Max, became her special companion. When the shelter offered her a part-time job, she accepted, eagerly, grateful for the chance to contribute to something meaningful. As Megan adjusted to her new life, the media attention surrounding her story grew. Journalists wrote articles calling her survival miraculous and unbelievable. Documentaries aired on television, featuring interviews with Ryan Carter, Dr. Emily Ross, and members of the expedition team. The public was captivated by her tale of endurance and hope. Some viewers claimed her story gave them strength during tough times, while others marveled at the mysteries of Island X. For the Johnsons, the spotlight was bittersweet. On one hand, they were proud of Megan's courage and resilience. On the other hand, reliving the trauma of losing her and nearly losing her forever was painful. David avoided interviews whenever possible, preferring to focus on supporting his daughter. Laura, however, embraced the opportunity to share Megan's story. "If it helps even one person feel less alone," she said in one interview, "then it's worth it." Ryan Carter remained a steady presence in their lives. He attended Megan's graduation ceremony when she completed her first semester of college, cheering alongside the Johnsons as she received her certificate of achievement. Afterward, he pulled her aside and handed her a small gift, a framed photo of Island X taken during the expedition. "This is where your strength comes from," he said softly. "Never forget how far you've come." Dr. Emily Ross continued studying Island X, uncovering more clues about its history. The carvings on the cliffs revealed patterns similar to those found in ancient Polynesian cultures, suggesting the island may have once been a stopover for early seafarers. Artifacts discovered near Megan's shelters hinted at previous inhabitants who might have used the land as a refuge. Scientists debated whether these findings could rewrite parts of maritime history. But for Megan, the discoveries added depth to her understanding of the place she called home for over a decade. Despite all the progress, there were still nights when Megan woke up crying, haunted by memories of the storm and the loneliness that followed. Laura would sit beside her, holding her hand until the tears subsided. "You're safe now," she would whisper. "We're here with you." Slowly, Megan learned to confront her fears, drawing strength from the love and support of her family. Jake, who had carried guilt for years, finally found closure. One evening, as they sat together watching a sunset, he turned to Megan and said, "I'm sorry I couldn't save you that day. I should have done more." Megan looked at him, her eyes filled with compassion. "You didn't fail me, Jake," she replied. "I survived because of everything you taught me, how to fish, how to stay strong. You were always with me, even when we were apart." David and Susan worked hard to rebuild their relationship with Megan. At first, Susan worried that Megan might resent her for taking Laura's place during those long years, but Megan surprised her by expressing gratitude. "You helped keep our family together," she said one afternoon while baking cookies together. That means a lot to me." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, filling the house with warmth and laughter. As time went on, Megan began to see her years on Island X not as a curse, but as a chapter that shaped her into the person she was meant to become. She often reflected on the lessons she had learned about survival, patience, and the beauty of nature. Though she appreciated the comforts of modern life, she never forgot the simplicity and clarity of living off the land. One sunny afternoon, the Johnsons gathered in their backyard for a barbecue. Friends and neighbors joined them, celebrating Megan's achievements and the unity of their family. As Megan stood surrounded by loved ones, she glanced at the horizon, where the sky met the sea. For a moment she thought about Island X, the jagged cliffs, the dense jungle, the symbols etched into stone. Then she smiled, turning her attention back to the people who mattered most. She had been lost, but now she was found. And this time, she wasn't letting go. Years passed and Megan's life began to take on a rhythm that felt steady and fulfilling. The scars of her past still lingered, both the visible ones on her skin from years of surviving in the wild and the invisible ones etched deep within her heart, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they became part of her story, reminders of how far she had come and the strength she had discovered along the way. By the time Megan turned 25, she had earned a degree in environmental science, inspired by her time on Island X and her work at the animal shelter. Her professors praised her passion for conservation, noting how she often spoke about the delicate balance between humans and nature. "If we don't protect our planet," she once said during a class presentation, "we risk losing places like the island I called home. It taught me more than survival. It taught me respect." Megan's graduation ceremony was a joyous occasion for the Johnson family. Laura cried openly as she watched her daughter walk across the stage to receive her diploma, while David beamed with pride. Jake, now married with a young son, held his nephew on his shoulders so he could see his aunt achieve this milestone. Even Susan wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought them all here. Ryan Carter attended as well, sitting quietly in the audience, feeling a sense of fulfillment knowing he had played a small role in bringing Megan back to her family. After graduation, Megan accepted a job at a nonprofit organization focused on protecting endangered ecosystems. Her first assignment took her to remote areas of the Pacific Ocean, where she worked alongside scientists studying coral reefs and marine life. Though the work was challenging, it filled her with purpose. She often thought about Island X, wondering if its untouched beauty still remained, or if it had been altered by time and weather. Part of her hoped it stayed hidden, preserved as a sanctuary untouched by human hands. Back home, the Johnsons adjusted to their new normal. David retired early, spending his days tending to the garden and teaching Megan's young nephew how to fish. Laura continued volunteering at the shelter, finding comfort in helping others. Jake and his wife welcomed another child, a daughter, named Lily, who quickly became the light of the family. Sundays were reserved for big dinners where everyone gathered around the table, sharing stories and laughter. Megan joined these gatherings whenever she returned from her travels, bringing gifts from distant places and tales of her adventures. Despite her success, Megan sometimes struggled with feelings of being caught between two worlds. The modern conveniences and comforts she enjoyed now contrasted sharply with the simplicity of her life on Island X. She missed the sound of waves crashing against rocks and the smell of salt in the air. To reconnect with those memories, she started taking long walks along the beach near her parents' house. There she would sit for hours, watching the horizon and letting her mind wander back to the days when the ocean was both her enemy and her ally. One evening, as the sun dipped below the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Megan found herself reflecting on everything that had happened since her rescue. She thought about the storm that swept her away, the loneliness of those early years on the island, and the disbelief she felt when she saw her family again after so many years apart. She remembered the kindness of strangers, the pilot who spotted her, the scientists who studied the island, the neighbors who welcomed her home, and realized how much their actions had shaped her path. As she sat there, lost in thought, Jake approached, carrying a thermos of hot cocoa. He handed her a cup and sat down beside her. "Thinking about the island?" he asked gently. Megan nodded. "Sometimes it feels like a dream," she admitted. "Like maybe none of it really happened, but then I look at my hands." She held them up, calloused from years of hard work. "And I know it did." Jake smiled softly. "You've done amazing things since coming back," he said. "Things most people wouldn't even try. You turned something terrible into something beautiful." Megan looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you guys," she replied. "Without all of you believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Their conversation drifted to lighter topics: Lily's latest antics, David's gardening mishaps, Laura's plans for Thanksgiving dinner. As they laughed together, Megan felt a warmth spread through her chest. For so long, she had carried the weight of survival alone. Now, surrounded by love and support, she understood what true strength meant. Not enduring hardship in isolation, but leaning on others and allowing them to carry you when you couldn't stand on your own. Meanwhile, Island X remained a topic, a fascination for researchers and historians. Dr. Emily Ross published a book detailing her findings, which included insights into the ancient carvings and their possible connection to early seafaring cultures. The book sparked widespread interest, leading to further expeditions aimed at uncovering more secrets. Some suggested turning the island into a protected site, ensuring its unique ecosystem and history would remain intact for future generations. Others argued it should stay untouched, a reminder of nature's resilience and mystery. Ryan Carter, too, continued to reflect on his role in Megan's story. Flying over oceans and remote islands became a deeply personal experience for him, each flight reminding him of the day he spotted the young woman waving desperately from the shore. He often wondered if fate had guided him to that moment, intertwining his life with Megan's in ways neither could have predicted. When he visited the Johnsons, he always brought updates about Island X, sharing photos and articles with Megan, who listened intently, her face lighting up with curiosity. For the Johnsons, life moved forward, filled with moments of joy and occasional sadness. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and milestones, cherishing the time they had together. Megan's presence healed wounds they thought would never close, proving that love and hope could bridge even the widest gaps. Yet they never forgot the years they spent searching for answers, holding on to the belief that Megan might still be out there. That belief, fragile yet unyielding, had kept them going. On a crisp autumn afternoon, the family gathered at the beach for a picnic. Megan stood at the water's edge, her toes sinking into the cool sand. She closed her eyes, letting the breeze brush against her face. For a moment, she imagined herself back on Island X, standing on the rocky shore, staring out at the endless expanse of water. But when she opened her eyes, she saw her family laughing and playing behind her. Her mother chasing Lily, her father teaching Jake's son how to skip stones, Ryan snapping pictures to capture the moment. Megan smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace. She had survived the unthinkable, endured unimaginable hardships, and emerged stronger because of it. Her journey wasn't just about finding her way home. It was about rediscovering herself and learning to embrace the beauty of life, no matter how unpredictable it might be. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden rays across the water, Megan whispered a quiet thank you to the island that tested her, to the sea that both took and gave, and to the people who never stopped believing she would return. Then, turning away from the horizon, she walked back to join her family, ready to face whatever the future held. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, vast and timeless, a symbol of both challenge and possibility. And though the waves continued to crash against the shore, the Johnsons stood together unshaken, knowing they had already faced the storm and emerged victorious.